Hi, listeners. This is the first episode of The Elephant in the Room, the podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Hansen. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a senior at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, majoring in psychology and minoring in kinesiology. I'm hoping to go into some sort of counseling profession down the road. My plan right now is to possibly get a license to become a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. As for this podcast, I'm so excited for people to listen and to hopefully gain more insight into this topic. The subject matter we will discuss in this podcast, which I will introduce to all of you in just a moment, is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. I do want to start off all episodes with a quick trigger warning. This entire podcast will be focusing on the concept of sexual assault, specifically sexual assault on college campuses. If at any point during the podcast you feel uncomfortable or triggered and need to turn it off, I completely understand. As a survivor myself, I get how triggering this topic can be, and I want every listener to feel comfortable and to feel supported. Sexual assault is something that can be very difficult to speak about, and that's what inspired the idea for this podcast's title. I think that this subject is oftentimes discussed at a surface level within the classrooms, which I do think there are valid reasons for that. However, I wanted to delve deeper and to push myself out of my comfort zone to bring awareness to others about how prevalent this issue is, as well as inform people about what the process may look like if they're seeking help from university officials, on-campus advocates, and the campus police. And just another quick disclaimer, all sources I am citing throughout this episode will be posted in the description below for anyone who is interested. Now, I think a great place to start is, what is sexual assault? Well, according to RAINN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, which happens to be the largest anti-sexual violence organization in the US, the term sexual assault refers to sexual contact or behavior that occurs without explicit consent of the victim. This could be through rape, attempted rape, unwanted sexual touching, coercing someone into performing sexual acts, child sexual abuse, and incest. I think it's really important for people to remember how much ground the term sexual assault covers. It is not just strictly tied to one type of sexual assault, it encompasses a wide variety of behaviors that are sexual in nature. Narrowing our vision to only one form of sexual assault, such as rape or sexual abuse, whatever it may be, I think has the power in some cases to potentially discourage survivors from reaching out for help, since they may perceive their story as less serious than others. For an example, if a person experiences inappropriate and unwanted touching from their partner, that is just as valid and just as serious as any other survivor's experience. This ties into some research presented by DeLove and Contaneo, Holland and Cortina, and Spencer et al., all three written in the year of 2017. Within those three research articles, the researchers displayed similar findings that survivors who either A, deem their experiences as not sexual assault, or B, perceive this assault as not serious, were less likely to seek professional help after the assault occurred. After taking the time to comprehend and reflect on these findings, it makes me think about how many survivors out there who have experienced such a traumatic event and who have potentially not fully recovered from it due to not seeking support. And they may be even repressing those memories for X amount of years, which I also think can cause more damage down the line. Going off of that last point I just made, I do want to recognize that seeking help after such an event is very difficult for some people. I know that it was for me. Also discussed within Holland and Cortina's 2017 article, they mentioned the concept of alternative coping mechanisms, finding other paths to follow to cope and heal from what has happened. In some situations, survivors may find it more comforting to seek help from family members, maybe even close friends. It can seem a little less daunting to approach somebody you're familiar and comfortable with. There may be more trust between a survivor and that person as you've known them for a longer period of time, and you trust that person to keep what you have shared private. Personally, I found comfort in these alternative coping mechanisms initially. The first person I actually told was one of my best friends, and I really only had the intention to keep it that way at that point. But as the healing process continued, I found that reaching out to others was needed in order for me personally to heal. A really important factor to address is the stigma survivors face when reaching out for professional help after an assault. Past research, specifically from DeLave and Cataneo 2017, Sabina et al. 2016, and Spencer et al. 2017, mentioned that several survivors experience feelings of shame, guilt, and embarrassment after being assaulted. And these negative feelings survivors endure play a huge role when it comes to seeking help and reporting the incident. Not only is it difficult for a survivor to revisit and explain to somebody what has happened to them, it's hard to know how someone may react. Survivors may fear the outcome of being judged or being blamed for what has happened. And although the assault is a direct reflection of the perpetrator's actions, it is hard for some survivors to see it that way. A survivor may think back to the time of the incident and think, what could I have done differently to prevent it from happening? Or why didn't I just say no or defend myself? Although support services from people such as health professionals, law enforcement, university officials, they're all there to assist survivors in coping and healing from their experience, it's that deeply rooted issue of victim blaming that can hold survivors back. So, knowing how prevalent this issue is, especially for college-age students, what needs to change? How can people play a role in eliminating the stigma and eliminating victim blaming and shaming? A really interesting finding from Krauss et al. 2019 researched into campus climate in relation to sexual assault. The authors were able to compile a total of 107 reports from 101 different campuses across the United States. The authors found a major inconsistency regarding how campuses defined sexual assault, as well as how they measured the occurrences of sexual assault. If colleges and universities dedicated time to eliminating this inconsistency, this could create a clearer picture for campuses to refer to when creating and implementing sexual assault policies on their campus, and to closely follow those of other campuses as well. In Brubaker 2018, she actually mentioned that it may be worthwhile for colleges and universities to implement consistent Title IX policies to utilize in sexual assault cases. For those who may not be familiar with Title IX, according to the U.S. Department of Education, it's a federal civil rights law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs and activities. Discrimination on the basis of sex can include sexual assault or sexual violence, such as rape, sexual assault, sexual battery, and sexual coercion. In essence, Brubaker argued that Title IX could actually provide college survivors with other options besides calling upon the criminal justice system to handle their case. And the inclusion of Title IX here at UWEC is discussed in greater length in a later episode of this podcast. A potential resolution that I think would make a huge difference is simply creating a stronger and deeper connection between university officials, on-campus advocates, and the student body, which was also brought up in Marquet et al. 2020. Additionally, in Mushanga et al. 2020, the authors researched the differing perceptions of campus responses to sexual assault amongst college students. Within their finding, there was a common theme concerning low levels of knowledge and awareness of campus supports that were available for the students. Knowing this, it really makes you think about how many survivors may not be receiving help after an assault due to lack of information about who to reach out to and where those support services are located on campus. I do think that greater communication would create more of a comfortable atmosphere and allow greater transparency regarding how sexual assault cases are handled. Correspondingly, greater advertising of support services, whether that be through posters and flyers, social media posts, maybe even campus-wide emails sent out periodically to students to notify them about these support services that are available. Lastly, there is a ton of research focusing on potential benefits of in-depth mandatory sexual assault training that could be implemented on college campuses. Kimberly and Hardman in 2018 ran a study that included nearly 5,000 college participants from 4 large universities in the state of Mississippi. A key finding of theirs was that participants who had received sexual assault prevention education and/or took part in a sexual education course were reportedly more likely to intervene if an assault were to potentially occur, in contrast from those who did not receive any sort of education. In a later study, conducted again by Kimberly and Hardman in 2020, they were curious as to what legal knowledge college students had acquired in sexual assault prevention education. After analyzing participant responses, they found that majority of the participants have little to no legal knowledge concerning sexual assault, keeping in mind that each of these participants had taken part in a sexual assault prevention education or sexual education of some sort. So although they found positive effects of education and intervention, there's still a lot of room for improvement, specifically in discussing legal aspects. And I think creating more in-depth sexual assault prevention education would ensure that all students are receiving an adequate amount of information. Not only is sexual assault prevention education important, Mellons et al. In 2018 also raises the importance of consent education for college students. Personally, I think it's very easy for the concept of consent to be just brushed over, but it is more than just hearing a clear yes or a clear no. It may seem simple, but what if alcohol and drugs were involved? Or what if the victim was incapacitated? What if the victim was manipulated or coerced? These are concepts that could easily be covered in consent and sexual assault prevention education. And this podcast will discuss consent in further detail later on as well. According to a second article in 2017 by Spencer et al., beyond just assisting the college student population in general, the implementation of sexual assault prevention and consent education, it may also assist survivors in reaching out and seeking help. Ideally, an education program that covers all aspects from basic definitions to reporting to the university to taking legal action. Providing survivors with as much information as possible may allow them to reflect on what option may be best for them in seeking help, if they so please. A certain pathway to seeking help is extremely different from survivor to survivor, and that is perfectly okay. I actually remember after talking about my experience with one of my former therapists, she mentioned to me that the path individuals take to seek help and to heal is not a one-size-fits-all, and that really stuck with me. So I know this is a lot of information thrown at you all at once, but I do think it adequately reflects how complex sexual assault and the reporting process can be. Within these next 4 episodes of the podcast, I aim to untangle and display what the process of handling sexual assault cases may look like here at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. I had the amazing opportunity to interview with multiple people. The next episode will be with Grace Clore. She is a sexual assault advocate here on campus and a part of CASA, which is the Center of Awareness for Sexual Assault. In episode 3, I met up with a very close friend of mine, Alyssa Nowicki, who was willing to share her story and perspective on this topic. After that, I will have an interview with Ashley Fritz, the Assistant Dean in the Dean of Students Office. And the last episode will be with Amanda Carrier, a UW-Eau Claire campus police officer. The information provided by all participants in this podcast were very insightful and very much worth listening to. So I hope that all of you can find some downtime to just take a listen and hear what they have to say. And with that being said, this is episode 1 of The Elephant in the Room, the podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Hanson, signing off.